Dr. Isabelle Morley, welcome to the WanderLearn show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
I love your book. It's my favorite book of the year, 2025. It's coming out actually in May
Mhm.
20th. We're going to be releasing this episode on May 20th to get people to go out there and buy it. It is an absolutely fantastic book. It's fun to read. But what's the title of the book?
Oh, the title is my favorite part, perhaps. It's called They're Not Gaslighting You.
And the
And
subtitle?
it's how to stop looking, ditch therapy speak and stop looking for red flags in every relationship.
If anybody who's kind of in a relationship or got out of a relationship, anybody who has any relationship with any human being, they might either be accused of or they will accuse other people of the following terms. And so this podcast is for those people who are either our recipient or deliver the word sociopath, psychopath, love bomb, narcissist, boundaries, borderline, toxic, and of course, gaslighting. Before we get into some of the terms, can you please give us a little bit of your credentials so people don't say, "Oh, I know this Isabelle woman. She gaslights everybody. She wrote a book just about."
Totally fair. Yeah.
So what's
Um,
your background a little bit?
so I'm a clinical psychologist. I went to graduate school for clinical psychology and trained there and got my doctorate. And then I trained specifically in couples therapy. So I'm an EFT certified couples therapist. That is all that I do now. I see couples day in, day out every week.
EST
EFT,
stands for.
emotionally focused therapy.
What does that mean?
Basically all about creating a secure attachment through healthy communication and conflict resolution skills.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
And then what did you notice in your therapy sessions? You started hearing these kind of clinical terms being weaponized. Go into that.
More and more people were coming into therapy saying, I've realized what the problem is with my spouse, with my parent, with my friend. It's because, Instagram taught me they're a narcissist or they're crossing my boundaries, right? Or there was all these red flags I didn't notice about my ex that I should have paid attention to. And it was people coming in with these foregone conclusions that weren't up for debate. They weren't up for, conversation to me weigh in, for us to find some conclusions together, but like they had answers that made them feel better about what had ever happened in that relationship. And there was no room for negotiation. And I realized how much these terms have taken over in our lexicon and our understanding of ourselves and our relationships in actually like a very unproductive way.
Right, absolutely. And so let's go into some of the chapters. We're going to go into about 5 chapters: chapter 4, 6, 7, 9, and 11. The first, chapter 4, we're going to jump to is the title is Are They Gaslighting You or Do They Just Disagree? Talk about that term gaslighting, which is the title of your book.
So gaslighting is a really severe abuse tactic that people use to gain power and control over another person. It's very serious. It's not that common. And people have taken this term and decided that anytime somebody disagrees with them, invalidates their experience or their memory of something, that it's gaslighting, which is really problematic because it takes away the important meaning of the actual term and sort of protects it as a severe abuse tactic. And it makes people feel like as soon as you've been accused of gaslighting, what can you really do besides apologize, right? And then you've been taught a lesson, which is don't disagree with them again. Don't invalidate their feelings again. Like don't get into an argument again, because then you'll be abusive, right? That's the message. And you can't have a relationship with that.
Right, because it's hard in any relationship. People have different perspective, different recollection, and things like that. And so inevitably people say, well, I don't remember I was that late. Oh, yes, you were. Well, and then now all of a sudden you're gaslighting because you honestly thought that you were maybe only 5 minutes late when in fact, maybe they thought you were 10 minutes late. And all of a sudden it becomes a big hullabaloo.
Yes, and people do. We remember things differently. We remember things in a generous way to ourselves. We always do remember things as being better for us than perhaps they were. And I
Of
think it's
course.
gotten right. I mean, we are our own protagonists. And it's gotten worse because people can now like play the tapes back and go and look at their text messages to try to figure out, well, I texted you at this time, so you were at least 7 minutes late, so it wasn't 5 minutes. So you're still trying to gaslight me, right? It gets into this granular nitty-gritty details, which again is not helpful for actually connecting with the person you're talking to.
So what should a person do if they feel they have been gaslit and that somebody is distorting their reality and trying to recollect things completely differently? How do you express it in a more productive fashion instead of saying, hey, you're gaslighting me?
This is the irony of all of it. First of all, you won't know People who are gaslit don't realize it's happening because it is a slow, insidious process where the abusive person, the gaslighter, is really good at making you doubt yourself to the point where you don't realize you're doubting yourself. You really believe the other person who's gaslighting you. So, first of all, you won't know for a long time, or somebody else will point it out to you. And second of all, if you are truly being systematically gaslit by someone, I don't recommend you approach them at all about it. I think that's a relationship you probably can't be in because chances are they're not just gaslighting you. They're also manipulating you. They're also isolating you. They're probably not a safe person to be in a relationship with. Like it's very rare we see gaslighting in an otherwise good relationship.
Right. And what about the flip side when you maybe say, okay, all right, I read Dr. Morley's book and I'm realizing that maybe I'm not, he's not gaslighting me or she's not gaslighting me. What's a better term then or way to express your frustration or anger or disappointment that their perception of reality is different than yours? What term should you use then, such a powerful term such as gaslighting?
Hmm. Your feelings, which is, I think, a revolutionary idea for a lot of people, but I would go to what you're actually feeling. I'm incredibly hurt that it feels like you're not hearing my perspective on this, or like I'm disappointed that like no part of you is listening to how I experience this and is making room for it, right? Like you're not just upset that you are, gaslit in your perception. You're hurt the other person isn't listening to you and isn't considering what you're saying. And that is much more effective to say.
Got it. You're right. Okay. So basically, instead of using a powerful term such as you're gaslighting me, which kind of ends all the conversations, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely. That's the end.
Yeah. And in fact, all the terms that you kind of overview on your book, not all of them, but most of them are kind of conversation enders.
Hmm. Hmm.
They're so
Yeah.
powerful. Basically, it's putting all the onus, all the problems on the shoulders of the other party, and you're Miss Innocent or Mr. Innocent that you've done nothing wrong because you're living with a psychopath or a gaslighter or a
Yes.
narcissist.
Yes. And that is really the problem is that it absolves us from responsibility in this sort of self-righteous way. Like we didn't do anything wrong. It's all the other person. We put the blame entirely on them. They have to then fix it and take care of it. We don't want to be a part of that because we're not at fault. And that doesn't create, I mean, it's not an environment where people are likely to change. When somebody feels unfairly blamed or accused of something, they're not going to, take that in and do a lot of work to change because they're going to be upset at you for blaming them and putting that fault on them. But there is a tendency to be blameless and to want to not be wrong or at fault in our relationships. But guess what? Like most of the time, everybody is a little bit at fault.
Right. That's so well said. Dr. Morley, a lot of the terms that you use are clinical terms like a gaslighting narcissist, sociopath, psychopath, things like that. But one of them is I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, a clinical one. It's called red flag. And in chapter 6, it's called, is it a red flag or are they just imperfect? Talk about
Mm.
the term red flag and its meaning and why you think it's misused and or weaponized.
So a lot of these terms, they had really important meanings at the beginning, even if they weren't actual clinical words. But so red flag is the idea of like danger. This is serious. You have to be careful. You have to watch out, right? Flood, fire. This is important. And so it used to be signs of potential abuse, that somebody might be a truly unsafe person to be close to or in a relationship with. And over time, with semantic bleaching, it has become a sign that somebody might be difficult in any way, that they may withdraw during a conflict. Red flag, right? Like they're not going to stay in the conversation with you. They're not going to listen to you. They're going to pull away and end the conversation. It means anything, any growth area somebody has, it could be perceived as a red flag. And the difficulty with that is, as you know, everyone has growth areas and thus red flags.
Right. And so what should you do in like you're thinking about dating somebody and the classic thing is like, oh, he's got too many red flags. What's a better way to express that?
I mean, I think there is a case to be made for looking at the evidence and seeing if you have enough of it and if the red flags are all pointing in the same direction, right? If there's like consistent behaviors that make you think somebody is perhaps a certain way and not someone you want to be with, that's great information. But just because somebody waits 2 days to call you back isn't a red flag that they are playing games and therefore you should never speak to them again, right? So like gather enough evidence for a good conclusion. And again, I go back to the feelings of if somebody's acting in a way that's making you feel concerned about their commitment to you.
One of the things I loved about your book, Dr. Morley, is that you the way you phrase it is that you ask a lot of these clinical terms, they require consistently across, not just consistency, but across many different relationships. So in other words, this person's red flag or his narcissism doesn't just show up in your relationship with him, but also that's the way he treats his sister, his mother, his co-workers, and it's just everybody he knows, all his friends, all are suffering from whatever is that red flag or negative trait that he has. And what a lot of people seem to forget is that they say, well, he's a narcissist to me, and therefore he's a narcissist, but he might not be a narcissist to almost anybody else. And that that's one of the key components to truly having some clinical disorder, is that you display that negative trait across the society.
Yes, it's pervasive, right? Somebody with a real anger problem doesn't just yell at you during fights. They also yell at coworkers eventually, right? They also yell at their family. You see it in many contexts, especially if it's people that they're close or comfortable with. You see the same behaviors. But we have this idea that some people might be so good at masking it and only presenting that way with us that somehow we've discovered the truth of who they are when nobody else has seen it. It's probably not true.
Right. Yeah. And then people seem to forget that we're all different people. Like, we all like to think of ourselves as one person. I show the same face to Isabel as I do to John, and as to do to Sally, and to my wife or girlfriend or whoever. And we seem to forget that we actually change our personality and our way of our behavior depending on the situation, the person, lots of variables. And so we're not showing the same face to everybody. So why should we be surprised that our spouse treats us differently than they might treat their cousin?
Yeah. And here's the worst thing that people really get bummed out by, but the people that you are closest to will also treat you the worst. They'll treat you the best, but probably the worst too, because it's you come home, you've had a bad day at work, you yell at your spouse because they're there and you need an outlet, and you know that they're the safest person to yell at. You can't yell at your boss for your bad day or you'll get fired, but you can go home and be rude to them and it's going to be okay. And that's no excuse, and it's not okay, but it is what humans do. So you do expect a certain degree of bad behavior from the people that you are closest to.
That's another fantastic message, Dr. Morley, about your book, is how you talk about, you emphasize consistently throughout your book, we are imperfect beings. We are flawed. We make mistakes. We're, all sorts of things like that.
Yeah. And I think I point to, I've been a psychologist for over a decade. I'm a couples therapist. I'm happily married for a long time. I still make the same mistakes with my husband. I'm still learning and struggling, yes, like everybody else.
And you share many of those things you share many of those things in the book itself, how you and your husband interact, and all the screw ups you do.
Yes. Of which there are plenty. Yes.
Chapter 7. Are they a narcissist, or did they just hurt your feelings?
Ooh, narcissist is so misunderstood right now. I think it's important to point out, you can have narcissistic traits and be sort of a narcissistic person in certain ways, or you can have a narcissistic personality disorder, which is a clinical diagnosis, which there has to be a fair amount of long-standing evidence for. It begins in sort of adolescence, early adulthood. You have to see it across relationships and contexts. And there's many criteria you have to meet. It's not just you're self-centered. It's 5 of 9 criteria that you are consistently meeting that is causing you some kind of deficit in functioning. You can't maintain your relationships. You keep getting fired from jobs, whatever it might be.
So hold on. So just taking selfies and posting on Instagram doesn't automatically make me a narcissist, doctor?
Hard to believe, right? Otherwise, guess what? This whole world is diagnosable.
And what percentage of the population? I think it's 1% that are narcissists, or roughly?
There's different stats, but it's up to 5 or 6, but probably lower. It's not that many people.
So you're saying statistically, if I've had 10 girlfriends and I claim that all of them are narcissists,
it's probably you.
My favorite part of the book, not my favorite, but one of my favorite parts of the book is that in the narcissist chapter, you said, oftentimes, first of all, number one, you said, out of all the couples you ever met, all the people who declare that their spouse or significant other is a narcissist, you've never actually found one who's actually clinically a narcissist. And number two, if anybody's the narcissist, it's the person who's accusing the other of being a narcissist.
Yes. I know, which it gets so complicated and murky with that, but it typically is. And that is in part, as I talk about in the book, abusive people have gotten very good at using therapy speak to protect themselves, to attack other people. And some abusive people have very low insight and are very victimy, like narcissists tend to be, and are often the ones who, yes, excitedly embrace that term incorrectly.
Chapter 9. Are they a sociopath or they just like you less than you like them?
This title is because everyone thinks their ex is a sociopath, and almost nobody is right. I think people think sociopathy means like lack of feelings, empathy, remorse, which is a component of sociopathy. And they forget that people who are sociopaths or who have antisocial personality disorder are breaking laws. Like they don't care about society's rules whatsoever. They're hurting people, they're hurting animals, they're breaking property. They have literally no remorse. They're reckless, they're irresponsible. The really significant things since childhood, and again, across contexts, across relationships. It's not just that they didn't care about your feelings.
When I was young, psychopath was the term du jour. And it seems to, I don't know when it transitioned over, in fact, to sociopath. When did that happen?
I don't know. It suddenly made that shift and it's very popular now. They're the same thing essentially. They're both antisocial personality disorder. They have slightly different characteristics, but they're almost interchangeable.
My understanding is a psychopath is far more functional and often, I read a statistic, and of course, you got to be skeptical about statistics, but that anywhere between 20 or 40% of Fortune 500 CEOs are sociopaths because the skill set that you need to rise to the top of a huge company, a psychopath is well suited to climb that ladder. Have you heard of similar statistics for psychopaths?
Yes.
Okay.
They tend to be more charming.
Yes.
And yes, more functional. They can contain it better. And they can abide by society's laws if it behooves them. Sociopaths are like a little more dysregulated and impulsive and can't really contain it as well.
Right. Chapter 11. Did they violate your boundaries or did they just not know how you felt?
So people might not understand this one at first glance, but the reason for this title is people don't automatically know your boundaries unless there are what I call like the universal boundaries of like, don't steal from me, don't physically harm me, right? Those things are sort of a given of like safety related issues, but boundaries are individual. And if you don't tell somebody what it is, they won't know what your boundary is until it's communicated by you or unless they cross it. And if they cross it, that's when they find out that was actually too far for them and they're not okay with it. And when that happens, it's not a crisis.
But wait, I was taught that I'm supposed to read people's minds. What's wrong here? Come on.
I know.
I'm supposed to know their boundaries. Just figure it out. I mean, and especially people have, everybody has boundaries, of course, and rules or regulations. If you do this to me, I get this, I feel this way about it. But they somehow think, everybody thinks that their boundaries or rules are universal. It's like, it's obvious. Of course, you should do the dishes after you eat. I mean, come on, everybody does this. I'm like, well, some people do it the next day, or some people do it immediately after dinner. Some people wait an hour or whatever. I mean, but for them, it's like they have certain rules and they just think that they're universal. I've traveled to 127 countries, so I've confirmed that rules are all over the place in every society.
Yes, and that's sort of the egotistical side of the human species of like everyone must feel the way that I feel about this or think the way that I feel. But I think the best example of how boundaries differ is flirting. For some people, it's like flirting is off the table. Flirting is cheating, right? Like that is not okay. I'm not comfortable with it. I don't want my partner to do it. Some people love flirting. They like to see their partner flirt with other people in front of them because it's part of, right, like their intimacy. So you can't know.
And then there becomes another layer of complexity is what is flirting? One time I had a girlfriend in Slovenia and I smiled to another woman as she was getting into the car. And then she yelled at me. She's like, I was standing right next to my girlfriend. And I was like, she got angry at me because I smiled at some woman. Why are you smiling at her? I'm like, Jesus, I just smile. I'm just to be a nice person. I'm with you right now. But that was flirting for her. And of course, that was her boundary, which I quickly discovered.
You found out the hard way, right? You crossed it and you learned. But here's a great example, too, of just because it's your boundary doesn't mean it's automatically respected. Maybe you want to be in a relationship where it's okay to smile at somebody of the opposite gender. Doesn't mean anything to you. And you don't want, because otherwise it becomes too controlling. So boundaries have to be negotiated. Sometimes you have to compromise. And maybe the compromise is, listen, that made me uncomfortable. I want to make sure you weren't trying to flirt with her on purpose. And you explain where you were coming from. And then it's like, okay, so smile at other women as long as it's, not you trying to act out in our relationship. That's fine.
Right. And that's the key point, is that, everybody has boundaries, and we have to somehow be open to negotiating. When are boundaries not negotiable? You talked about the kind of what you called universal boundaries. What
Yeah.
are those?
Those are related to safety. Those are things that if they are not respected, it's just not a safe relationship. It's probably an abusive relationship. So you don't want to ever be worried that somebody is going to assault you, right? You don't want to ever be worried about your
Hold
sexual.
on. But maybe some people will say, I don't feel safe sharing my feelings, so this is an unsafe relationship. So you've crossed my universal boundary.
Not a universal boundary
Okay.
because not everybody will agree with that. I mean, universal boundaries are things that every human everywhere can say, yeah, I don't want it. If anyone does that to me, it's like a no-go territory.
Right. And that would
Yeah.
be like rape, or, sexual
Yeah.
abuse, or verbal abuse, or physical abuse, that kind
Yeah.
of stuff.
Gaslighting.
Yeah, a real gaslighting.
Real gaslighting.
Absolutely. Now, what about the flip side of this? Is that somebody who can try to then now the opposite problem that your book could create, which all of a sudden people who are either maybe not a true gaslighter, maybe not a true narcissist, but they show narcissistic tendencies, or behavior, or they do cross boundaries with impunity often, and they pull out your book and they throw it at their spouse every single time to say, "See, I'm not really doing any of this stuff. I'm just fine. You're exaggerating the problem." And in other words, it's the opposite of the other thing. Basically, denying, deflecting, and saying, "Well, I haven't done anything wrong. You're exaggerating with your weaponized therapy speak."
I mean, this is always the risk, is that abusive people are good at taking anything and using it in their favor. And I try to talk a lot about my book about what abuse is, what it looks like, and resources in the back for people who are wondering if they're in an abusive relationship. There are a lot of amazing books and places to go to find the answer to that question. Because yes, people could take this book and try to use it to absolve themselves of responsibility when they shouldn't. But honestly, more likely than not, I don't think those people are going to be reading my book.
um, yeah, it's true. Let's talk about some of the mistakes that couples make in that. One of the more common ones. What would you say is something that you see consistently at almost every therapy session, and you just wish if you could take a megaphone and tell everybody, what would it be?
Oh, I mean, there's two top ones. One is people need to be right. They really argue about being right, about
I'm
remembering
guilty.
things
I'm
right.
guilty. I'm guilty.
We are. It's like a human innate desire to prove that we were right about something or about a perspective. But the old adage, you can be right or you can be married, is very true. You have to give up on the need to be right. Everybody can be right. Everyone is wrong. And that always leads couples into trouble. No one does well with that fight.
So how do you cure me now, or cure all the people listening to this, because we all want to be right? I mean, how do we, like, everybody wants to pursue the truth,
Oh
and
God,
and
capital
there's,
T.
yeah, capital T, and in rare cases there is an objective truth. Like, let's say, somebody says, "I texted you at 7 o'clock," and then, no, you didn't, and then there's an actual timestamp that says 7 o'clock. So that is the universal truth. So
Mhm.
can't you say that that's an instance where you're saying you truly are right?
You
Maybe.
are, but you've lost, right? You can be right and then you've lost because you didn't get what you needed, which is to somebody to actually care about how you felt about the fact they texted at that time or didn't, right? And then what do you gain from being right? Like it puts you in this like moral high ground or cognitive high ground, but people miss the point. When you're battling in that cognitive space, you're not emotionally connected. So what I tell people is you are right. You're right. Your memories, your experiences, your feelings, it's all right. And that doesn't mean that your partners aren't also absolutely all right. You can both be right, even if you don't agree with each other. And that is the answer, is that you can be right and so can your partner, and your two realities don't have to be the same.
Let's try to take a practical example, Dr. Morley, that maybe either from your personal life or from one of your clients, where somebody was definitively right, but you still had to kind of teach them that, hey, it's better to stay married.
People argue a lot about timing, about division of household tasks. So people argue about I asked you to do the dishes,
Mm.
while I was gone at work today because you work from home and you didn't do them. And I came home and they weren't done, so I had to do them when I got home. Right. And
Right.
then they can argue about, well, you didn't say I had to be done by this time. So I was just going to do it when I was done with my workday at 6 o'clock. And it was your choice to come home and do them before I had a chance to. You didn't say I had to do it while you were out of the house. And they said, well, obviously it meant that I wanted you to do them while I was gone. Otherwise, I'd come home to a messy kitchen, and that's what I was asking you to fix, right? And people go back and forth. And maybe they said, can you do them while I'm away so that I come home to a clean kitchen? And they were right. But instead of that whole conversation, I would have just cut to them coming home and saying, hey, it makes me feel hurt and unheard. Like you don't care about how I feel when I asked you to do the dishes and I come home to see them still in the sink.
Right. Um, a lot of this stuff has got to do with just hearing the other person's pain, right?
Yes. Hearing it and being willing to share it. And that's the part we have a hard time with right
What
now,
do you mean willing to share it? In other words, to feel their pain?
to express our own pain and to be vulnerable with someone.
What do you mean
People
express your own pain?
to say, I felt hurt, unprioritized, like you don't care about me
So
is
people would
vulnerable.
rather just insult you and say, you suck.
Yes. You
And
did something wrong. You should feel bad, as opposed to you did something that made me feel bad. And now I have to let you in and see if you're going to care that I feel bad about something. That's
mm,
way riskier.
you say a good cocktail for working on your relationship is specificity, vulnerability, and commitment. Can you
Hmm.
kind of expand it a little bit on that?
Yes. So specificity. This thing happened that made me feel this way. That kind of goes into the vulnerability. Don't make it a global attack on the person or what always happens or that they are a certain way. It has to be like this event happened, and that's what I'm talking about.
All right. So you can't say, you always suck. You always are
Hmm.
horrible. You're always late.
Hmm.
Just you were late
So
last
lazy.
Thursday.
Exactly. Exactly. And then moving into vulnerability, which is instead of, blaming you did this, you never do this, saying, I felt this way because of what happened, right? Like this was my experience of that event. Not you made me feel bad, but like I felt bad. And taking away that piece of blame and finger pointing is essential because it makes the other person so much more likely to actually listen to you and be empathetic towards what you're saying. And then commitment I put in there because people fight without remembering they have to, do the Oreo sandwich of like, and I love you. And I want to work on this with you. And I'm telling this to you because I want to figure this out together. And I'm committed to communicating about it, even if it's hard. And that is an important component because these discussions can be hard and they can be disconnecting. So you have to make an effort to reconnect.
Yeah, you have to put a bow on the end of the argument to basically say, hey, let's not forget where we came from, what we've gone through, and that we still love each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Choose someone. This is where we'll end on is, and this great part of your book. It says, in this world, I'm quoting you, in this world of messy humans, how do you know who will be a good person for you to be with? My answer is choose someone who wants to keep doing the work with you. Explain that.
Mm. There's no perfect person out there. There's no one who is not going to upset you, who is not going to trigger you, who is not going to make you doubt the relationship and make you doubt your desire to be with them. Um, any close relationship is going to bring you to that place. So what you're looking for is someone who's going to be in the trenches with you. And when things are really hard and you're fighting and you're disconnected, that you both are going to be, saying, I want to figure this out. This is hard and this sucks. And I'm committed to my half of the work. And I know you're committed to yours. And we'll keep going until we get to the other side of it. Because those are the relationships that thrive, is the people who are willing to do their part of the work and to stick with it, with you. That's success.
As a couples therapist, do you have an objective to keep people together or keep or help, or if they say we want to split or we want to stay together, do you have an objective or are you just there to kind of listen and give advice?
I only care if it's abusive, in which case I don't work with them. I help them get out of a bad situation, which is rare. I'm a romantic. I love love. I'm always rooting for the couples that I work with, and I work in that direction. But some people find through the work that they actually aren't a good fit, that they
When
aren't able.
when do you throw in the towel in a relationship? I mean, let's say you feel that your partner is doing their best. They're trying. They're trying to work things through, just like what we just talked about. And yet, despite it, he just keeps falling short to whatever standard you have. You know, do you just keep tolerating it and you do your part to just suck it up? Or do you, at what point do you just say enough is enough? Maybe he's not abusive, but for whatever reason, you're just exhausted.
I mean, I think that's a good enough reason for me. If you've decided that you're done waiting, you're done working, and that even though they're trying and he's doing his best to make changes that are important, you have nothing left and no time left to give him,
Mhm.
then that's your answer, I think.
Yeah. But then from his perspective, he might say, well, you just gave up on us. In other words, you threw in the towel instead of, I thought you were this woman who's going to be committed to the end and, give it your all. And it didn't take a whole lot to give up, or they may, from their perspective, they say, well, no, I gave it my all. And just sometimes
Yes. And that happens. And that's the scary thing about being in a romantic relationship or really any relationship is that they could always end. We have the illusion that they won't, but they always could. People can always decide to exit that relationship. That's just the risk you take. And everybody does their best, and sometimes they don't work out.
right. It's so true. So, in conclusion, any parting words of wisdom that regarding back the theme of your book? By the way, go to the link down below to get a copy of Dr. Isabelle Morley's book. It's a great book. They're Not Gaslighting You is the title, and it's very rare that people actually get gaslit. But any parting words of wisdom regarding the weaponization of these therapy speak that people have in relationships?
Mm. Here's what I'll say. I have never had to use any of these terms in my relationships. I have never had to call a boundary violation for it to be heard and respected. And so I think there's no reason to take these words outside of the therapy room. And you would benefit more from focusing on your feelings and communication as opposed to leaning on clinical terms to get your point across.
Very well said. Well, I really hope your book takes off and does well
Thank
because
you.
I think these terms have gone a little bit too pervasive in society.
Too far. Yes.
And that one last thing, I guess, sorry to one last thing. We haven't spoken about the true victims, the people who truly are gaslit, who truly live with psychopaths, sociopaths, who truly live with narcissists. What happens is kind of like, 10 people get murdered and all of a sudden we say it's a genocide. That like takes away the power of the word genocide. It's a very powerful word.
Yeah.
And if we call any mass murder, oh, that's genocide because, 10 people died, that's not genocide. And then you're just taking away the few times in history where there was really a genocide. And the same thing, we are devaluing those words for the people who are the true victims, and they do exist, of people who are living with people who are quite harmful psychologically or physically, right? And so that's one reason why you should be careful about just flippantly using these words, not just because it might end debate, not because it might be a little bit injurious to your partner and very insulting, but you're also insulting all the people who actually have gone through true trauma.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's like the misuse of trauma bond, which we didn't get into, but like that's taking away a really important term to explain a complicated psychological phenomenon. And the people who have lived through it no longer have that to explain their experience because people misunderstand it. So, yes, like these terms matter. Their meanings have to be protected because people are really victims of these things. And if we take these words and with semantic bleaching, make them mean anything and nothing, suddenly there's no power left.
Well, great podcast. I loved it. And I hope to have you back sometime. And good
Thank
luck with your
you.
book. Get the book. Uh, thank you again, Dr.
Thank
Morley.
you. Thank you so much for having me. It was a great conversation.